Hey up lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more Infinite Lagrange. Today, carrying on with the cruisers, and as you can see behind me, we are looking at the Io, one of my favourite ships in the game. Has multiple uses across different variations, so yeah, let's jump into it. So the base version of the Io is a little bit more strictly towards anti-cruiser and anti-large, so battle cruisers, carriers, that kind of thing. Problem with that, for the most part in the current meta situation, is its direct fire damage, and due to that, and most people running sort of cruisers more back row than they are front, you do see HC Chimera. And this thing hurts the HC Chimeras a lot, mostly because HC Chimera is having subpar energy resistances compared to other cruisers, and this being like pure energy damage. So it has potential, but in the current meta, it's not quite that good. So I actually don't recommend running the base variant at the moment. Although having like good dodge rates and stuff like that, it's just not enough to keep it around and alive. Particularly long enough to sort of, keep it going. However, if you are going to run it, it's a front row, so we are looking at defense first as per usual. Go straight into the additional propulsion system, grab both of the evasion buffs. This brings your evasion up quite nicely, because you've got a base evasion of 15% anyway from the high-speed turning system. You can get another further 8%, 16% there, brings you to 31%. So it's not bad whatsoever. 31% on a cruiser is pretty decent. Actually, it's the only cruiser, bar the Connemara Chaos, that can actually get any dodge rate, at all, I think, anyway. So it's quite nice on the front row. Again, like I said, though, they do die pretty quickly still, especially if you come up against, anything that's currently meta. If they're running, like, Heavy Carillion with the Tauruses and the Heavy Cannon Eris's and stuff like that, they will drop a little bit quick, unfortunately. Anyway, after you've done the evasion, double HP mods, and then I recommend picking up the double resistance mods. The armor, you could argue dropping one of the energy resistances to pick up the physical resistance. Literally purely due to bringing you to 80 armor, so it's an extra 30 damage mitigation against, say, HC Eris and that kind of thing. So be aware of that. It could be useful there. The reduced chance of being hit by missiles and torps is genuinely not needed on this, mostly because it's front row and those missiles or torps are going to be hitting mid row and back row anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Once you've done that, my recommendation from there is going into the heavy, the Vigan Iron Cannon system, its main weapon system. The strategy on this is one of the better ones, so I do recommend picking this one up. You have got 6 slots to play with here. So generally what I'll be trying to do is picking up the hit rate first, the hit rate against the cruisers and higher class ships. You can ignore this one in favour of like an extra damage instead. But I personally pick this up. So picking up double hit rate, then the double cooldown, one of the damages, and the strategy, or dropping one of the hit rates against cruisers and higher class ships are the one I'd recommend dropping. It's only an extra, 5%, I think, better, versus this just getting an all-round better hit rate. And you are going to be fighting things other than cruisers quite often, mostly destroyers, frigates in the current meta, so this hit rate's going to provide you a better boost to damage. And then picking up the strategy, though. The strategy increasing the damage frequency by 4, as well as increasing its hit rate by a further 35%, and the duration of fire by 100%. Really good strategy on this. It doesn't trigger, all the time. It's not as good as, say, the Type B, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's still pretty decent. After that, highly recommend going into the generic launching system, where, in my opinion, you're picking up double hit rate against the frigates, 1 cooldown, and 1 of the missile torp damage. You got to bear in mind this is firing at small, so you are hitting destroyers and frigates mostly, so you do want that increased hit rate here for certain. It will help out quite a bit. Actually does a surprising amount of damage, the missile system alone, because I've had a few battles where the Vigan ion cannon's been knocked out, so only missile system's been working, and it does reasonably well. After that, integrated battery system here doesn't really matter too much. It's pretty poor at hitting anything anyway. However, if you are going to put points into it because you want to see the max ship, you can kind of ignore this system if you wanted to. But if you do want to see the max ship, going into the weapon system, hit rate, double cooldown, and 1 of the damage types is what I'd recommend there. Again, you're only getting 35 damage, so a 10% damage increase is only 3.5 damage. Really doesn't add up to all that much, unfortunately. And that's, you can see there, I got plus 10, that's with 30% damage increase. So it rounds down, so bear that in mind as well. After that, moving over to the propulsion system, highly recommend just going double cruising speed on here. It brings it up to 845 speed, if I remember off the top of my head. We can double check that when we go to Type B, because I'm pretty certain I've got that one maxed. So yeah, with 845, it fits really, really nicely into the 845 fleet with frigs, destroyers, so it does pretty well in that situation. Let's move on to Type B. Currently, one of my favourite ships in the game. I have been running this server and last server, albeit there is a caveat to running it, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So again, we are still front row. So again, you're going double evasion on the high-speed turning engine, which is kind of hard to see, the additional propulsion system here. Moving over to the armor system, double HP, double energy res, or 1 energy res, 1 physical res. I've gone for the physical and energy here because we are seeing a bit more mixed fleets than just pure energy. And then moving over to the Vigan ion cannon system. Now, as you can see here, I had all the points, so I just kind of picked stuff as went anyway. Double frigate destroyer hit rate is a must, especially with Carillions around and stuff like that. I recommend then after that the double cooldown, 1 damage, and pick up the focused attacks. This is really, really good. Sinks all weapons in the system to prioritize attacks against frigates and destroyers, activates a maneuvering mode, and increases hit rate by 40% and evasion by 20% every 30 seconds for 15 seconds. Originally, this only triggered against frigates. It now triggers against destroyers as well, making this pretty decent on the front row in a tank format due to the fact that you got a 20% evasion here for 15 seconds. It's up half the time basically there. You've also got your 31% base, so you're bringing this up to a 51% dodge rate cruiser with like 72,000 HP, decent armor. You're looking around like 20% energy res. With the setup I have, you can go to 30%, but you lose 30 armor. So really, really good. After that, into the weapon system, double hit rate again, 1 cooldown, 1 damage is my recommendation here. There is a increased hit rate for the to hit cruisers and above. Just don't recommend it, mostly because this thing's going to be shooting small things anyway. And as you can see, does a pretty alright damage per hit. And yeah, does quite well at hitting frigates destroyer. Thanks to the Vigan ion cannon system, and something little caveat I'll talk about when after I talk about the integrated battery. We'll see how I kind of use this a little bit more. For the air system, again, it's hit rate, double cooldown, and damage. As we can see here, you don't really get that much extra damage. I think you get 2 extra damage from that because I think 10's from the plus 30%. So not particularly great, but you know, there it is. And then over to the propulsion system, like I said, double upgrade the cruising speed brings you to 845. So I was right off the top of my head. Caveat to this is it doesn't quite have enough hit rate versus Carillion. Everything else it does, and it rips things apart pretty rapidly. I had a battle recently with a guy running HC Eris, and these just absolutely shredded through his destroyer line in literally no time at all, and they were pretty well upgraded as HCRSs, so bear that in mind. I do also run a few, so I run 5 of these in my main fleet currently, but I'm running about 4 series tacticals to, help boost the hit rate, as well as 5 Predator tacticals, again, further boosting hit rate. So I am just trying to chuck as much hit rate buffs at this thing as I can, and it's working out. It's able to kill Carillions and stuff, and it's pretty nice at doing that. Highly recommend, if you get the B, try it out, especially if you've got series tacticals or Predator tacticals. Siege type, unfortunately don't have enough points to run both the B and C, otherwise I would. The C type is the king of siege damage in the game, pretty much. There are, I believe the spear can get higher siege damage, but the spear is slow as all hell. This thing's still running at 845 movement speed, and for hitting amps or anything like that, outposts, and just knocking them out within minutes, these are the way to go. So, because you're generally not going to be putting this into your main fleet, and this is for, getting around the back of enemies, hitting their amps, and that kind of thing, you can generally ignore the sort of armor and health and the tanky stuff in this. You will want it, especially if you want it to stay around a bit longer to hit more than 1 amp. But if you are just trying to get out there just to kill a couple of amps and then get it back, repair it, get it back out there, you can ignore the sort of combat, the tank stuff. However, bear in mind, this is terrible against ships in general. Highly don't recommend running it in a main fleet. And while you're killing amps and stuff, if a fleet's coming at you and it's going to hit you before you can kill the amp, retreat, because this thing will just flat out lose. But in the instance I was talking about, in a purely just to get in and kill people or kill their amps, start off with the Vigan iron cannon system. You want to pick up double cooldown. You don't necessarily have to pick up the hit rate here. I haven't noticing it doing too much, which means you can pick up the double siege damage, and definitely pick up the strategy here. When a target is a city or base, turn off all other weapon systems, increase the main weapon's rounds per cycle by 3%, and the primary iron cannon's continuous fire duration by 60%. Basically, just a massive increase in damage when it's shooting amps and bases and outposts. And that brings you to 5 slots. So here, you can pick up the hit rate. It does help a little bit versus outposts. They can potentially miss. They don't miss a lot. So you can actually just go for one of the damages in the last slot as well, because that will further boost your siege damage. After that, recommend going into the generic missile systems. Again, it doesn't really matter what you're doing here because the iron cannon is doing most of the work. But I recommend picking up the cooldown and then double damage. You can ignore the hit rates again. They are against frigates, destroyers, and you are not getting this into a battle. At that point, or skip the missiles and just go straight into the cruising speed and be done with it, and that's your ship sorted. So it can be a very TP efficient ship if you want it to be. Because you don't need to put into the tank, you don't necessarily have to put into the missile launcher or the defensive battery, because the ion cannon is going to be doing all the work anyway when it's in that siege role. So at that point, you can completely ignore it. However, if you do want to take it a little bit further, you can go into the armor systems, same as the A and the B type, and the additional propulsion system as well. Same thing, just grab the evasion, grab your double health. Against outposts and that sort of thing, they don't actually have any energy damage, so picking up the physical resist first, and your HP is probably all you really need, to be fair. You can pick up the energy and then go into the missile launcher or the defensive battery at that point. Obviously, you've picked up the evasion. Just in case you do get caught by a fleet, it gives you a little bit of leeway to run away, and you got a little bit more time to sort of respond to your fleet being attacked. So there you have it. That is the Io, one of my favourite ships in the game. The siege type, fantastic for just knocking out amps in rapid time, again with that movement speed and stuff like that. You can quite often get onto an amp and blow it up before the enemies have time to respond. The B type, with a few extra ships and stuff, really strong, does extremely well against the frigate destroyer meta. I've been running it recently, I've been enjoying it, using it recently. Costs a lot and you will lose them, but they will do tremendous work against the current meta. So do recommend, if you have got the B, test it out. And obviously if you've got the C, definitely give it a go for siege warfare. It's fun. You can hit cities and be doing like 1 million damage, and it'll be purely just coming from like your 8 siege IOs and stuff like that. It's quite fun. So if you do want to sort of beat your mates in that corp leaderboard on cities, just drop 8 siege IOs onto the city right after you've killed all the fleets, just to wind them up, especially if they don't have it. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.